On the background of this image, you see the Chinese wall. Why did I choose this picture? Because I'm going to talk about walls in this video. The Trump administration at the moment, that is the 30th of January 2019, is a bit obsessed with this wall between the United States and Mexico. The wall, so-called, is to prevent human trafficking and other filth from Latin America entering the United States. Even though it is proven by records that most illegal migration, which also brings forth much crime with it, happens on airports. So why this whole obsession about the wall? Now, this video is not about American politics, okay? There's much wrong with American politics, so I'm not going into that now. The whole fascination, let's say obsession with walls, have existed throughout human history. The Chinese wall was designed to keep the Han Chinese in the Chinese Empire. It was a psychological operation in which the Chinese overlord, which they call the emperor, convinced the population that there was this big threat from the north of Tartaria. The north, what we today call Siberia, was considered the north of Tartaria. Tartaria is a name that's used to describe a region, and that region is between the Caspian Sea and the Caspian Sea, the Ural Mountains, all the way to the Pacific. That was all called Tartaria, or Tartaria Magna in Latin. After I would say the 1860s, when Russia expanded into the north of the region called Tartaria, people stopped using the name Tartaria. But okay, I just want to point that out. So the Chinese emperor wanted to convince, and he did, he managed to convince the Han Chinese that they needed a wall to protect them from raiders and groups or gangs of robbers that would come from the cold north to assault their precious kingdoms, because the Han Chinese and also the other Chinese tribes, they were ruled by local kings. So the local kings, together with the overlord of those kings, they constructed over some centuries, they constructed this wall. Now the wall was constructed within I believe a few decades, but they kept renewing it and extending it century after century. Now, this whole Chinese wall operation was a psychological operation to trap the people. Because when you look at the bigger picture and you put things in context, there was no objective reason why nomads that lived in the cold north would want to assault the warm south. If they wanted to go to warm regions, they could just travel towards Central Asia, and you would have much warm places right over there. And during the Roman Empire, it was quite easy for them to trade, even to trade illegally with the Eastern Roman provinces. So this whole idea that they needed a wall to protect them doesn't stand when you look at the evidence. Now, why do you build a wall? I just explained it to you. To keep things in. Look, if you build a wall around the prison complex, to prevent the prisoners from escaping. Because if you don't build a wall complex, any prisoner can just get out of the building and walk away. That wouldn't be a good use of a prison. You build a wall to make it hard for them to get out. Now, they can still get out with a wall, but it will be quite difficult. That's why you want the walls to be high. And to make things worse, you build a trench, or you dig a trench outside of the wall. I mean, outside of the complex, so that they will also encounter water once they get out of there. So you do this to keep things in. The castle lords in Europe that construct their castles, they want to keep their resources in. That means the gold and silver, which was their money, and also the tribute they received from the farmers. That is grain, wheat or vegetables or whatever, or livestock, whatever it is. Walls are designed to keep things in. For example, in the National Archives of Spain that were constructed in the late 18th century, you had thick walls. And those thick walls meant to preserve the documents of paper within the archives by keeping the temperature low. So walls are always intended to keep things in. Just think about virtual walls now. You use a password when you log into Facebook. Why do you have a password? So that only you have access to the data, so only you can alter the data. Why do you have privacy settings? Who can see or don't see your page? To keep things in, so that people can't just come and take things that you don't want them to see. So walls, whether they're virtual walls or whether they are real physical walls, intend to keep things in. So whenever there's a project that has a wall in it, is to keep things in. Now, in some cases, it's justified. For example, if you had a capital in ancient times, you need to have a wall because there were enemies that wanted to take over. Not just foreign enemies, but enemies from within. So you want to know who has access to the data of the country. Now, the reason I talk about walls is because, spiritually speaking, Satan often comes with wall projects. I'm not talking about the wall project that's going on in the United States now. Well, I'm not sure if that wall is going to happen, but likely it might happen if things continue like this. But who knows? We'll see what will happen. What I mean with a wall project is when people begin to establish barriers between them and others to feel secure. Those are wall projects. You can call them enforcing boundaries, or you can call it whatever you want. It comes down to that you establish fictive limitations that don't exist just to secure your sense of well-being. That's what it comes down to. And wall projects, they always fail eventually, because you think that the wall will keep you safe. That's not true, because you may, according to you, prevent things from coming in that you don't want to come in, and that's true. But who tells you, or who told you, that whatever is within the wall, it's safe to begin with? Look, some folks, this happens in the world, when they get a significant other, whether it's a boyfriend or girlfriend, they tend to lower contact with all other people, especially people of the same sex as theirs, because they want to secure the relationship that they have. Only a few people they allow close to them. That's how they want to preserve the approval of their significant other. And later they find out that they're isolated from relatives and from friends, and now the significant other, whom they expected to value them, is now exploiting them. And then they figure out that they were with a malignant narcissist. Did those walls, those emotional walls that they constructed, did it benefit them? No, it didn't. It only made things worse. So wall projects don't always involve literal physical walls. It's when people psychologically want to construct limitations. Those limitations don't really exist, but they want to enforce those limitations through violence or through manipulation, just to secure their sense of well-being. It's a sense of well-being, but it doesn't mean that the real well-being is there. Now, this attitude of constructing, this attitude of building, let me say, by establishing hindrances to feel secure, it is a trap. And I'm going to use an example of recent history. It's not really that recent, but it's of the Spanish Empire, and it relates to the native tribes or native ethnicities that lived in what we today consider the west of the United States. The United States, as we know today, didn't exist back then, but today the western states of the United States we call the west of the United States, or West America, some people call it. Now, I'm using that term to describe to you what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the region in the center from the Mississippi towards the Rocky Mountains. I'm talking about from the Rocky Mountains towards the Pacific. That includes regions like the Nevada Desert, the Grand Canyon. I'm talking about that. The Spanish back then built towns at the Pacific coast of the Californias. They even constructed some military bases near the coast. And they had some roads that they constructed. Just a few. But the majority of the territory, they did nothing with it. Except trading with the natives. And the kings, or the elite of the natives, they paid tribute to the viceroy, who was the representative of the Spanish king in North America. Now you may ask, why didn't the Spanish construct more roads, establish a better administration? Because now you had this large landmass that they called the Californias. You had only a few Spanish towns at the coast. You had the capital at the coast also. But to reach, let me say, more land inwards in the territory, they had to use what I would call the natural roads, or the common roads that the natives constructed, which weren't that suitable for the Spanish troops. You may think, hold on a minute, when it comes to Nueva Granada, New Granada is a region today called Colombia. The Spanish constructed quite some roads and established quite some towns. And now we have a region with much fertile land, and it's much cold over there. Why didn't they construct a better administration? Some people may say the Spanish were dumb for not doing that. And then you also see that the Spanish established maritime forts and even some small towns in the region today called Alaska. And then you think further, what? The Spanish didn't even construct a functional administration for the Californias. Why are they going to the cold north? And there are also Russians that want to settle over there. So don't even think, why is Spain doing this dumb thing? Now, I'm going to explain to you, it appears dumb. But when you look at it from an administrative point of view, you will understand why it was a smart move. Remember, from Acapulco, that bay of Mexico, the Spanish administered the Philippines. The Philippines at the time also included the Guam, the Marian Islands, and many other, the Caroline Islands also. It contained many islands on the Pacific. That was their Pacific kingdom they established. It was governed from Mexico, and from the Bay of Acapulco, they sent, that's from that point they sent ships which kept communication with the Captain General that governed the Philippines. From Acapulco you had many vessels that went there for the trade with China through the Philippines. But from the Philippines were also ships going to the South America, to Guatemala, also to California from time to time. So it comes down to this. The Pacific Ocean was already occupied by the Spaniards. The ethnicities that lived on the Pacific Islands, they were now under the rule of the Spaniards. So that means that all the Pacific ethnicities that wanted to trade with mainland North America had to deal with the Spanish administration. Before the Spanish administration, the Pacific tribes, or the Polynesians, whatever you want to call them, let me just use the word Polynesians here, the Polynesians could easily arrive at land and trade with the native tribes in North America. When the Spaniards came, they established a viceroyalty of New Spain with their autonomous kingdoms, and they established the Philippines. Now the Polynesians couldn't just do that anymore. They now had to go through the viceregal administration of North America. That also implies that the natives of North America couldn't just trade freely anymore with those on the Pacific. And it gets better for the Spaniards, because the Caribbean, the main maritime power in the Caribbean were the Spaniards. So the natives that lived in the region of the Rocky Mountains, was between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific coast, they couldn't just go to the Caribbean anymore because it was Spanish. And if they thought they could go to the east of North America, well, the Mississippi eventually became the border of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. So the Mississippi had the Spanish Navy patrolling on it. And towards the north, there you had the North Pole. And if you would go towards what we call Alaska, the Spanish were there also. So those native tribes between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific, they were trapped. They couldn't go anywhere without encountering the Spaniards. That's why the Spanish administration didn't make much effort in building an effective administration of the Californias, because they knew that they've won. And some of the natives back then, those that paid attention, may have realized that they were stuck. But how did they become stuck? Because over time, they resisted the Spaniards. The tribes of the Indian tribes, Indian ethnicities that live more towards south, towards the Caribbean, they collided with the Spaniards, and they got an important role in the Spanish administration. While those in what Spanish later called the Californias, they didn't want anything to do with it. But the Spaniards realized, okay, we can't use our military force to occupy them because we don't have a big military force to begin with. What we do have maritime powers, and what will we do? We'll construct towns at the coast and put our navy there. We'll put our navy there, and sooner or later those natives that resist Spanish would realize they can't go anywhere. So the resistance of those native tribes, those wall projects of theirs, worked against them. If they would have collided with the Spaniards, they may have gotten a better role in the Spanish administration, and they would have become stakeholders of the Spanish economy, just like the other tribes in the Spanish Empire became. But now, the native tribes, or native ethnicities, between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific, they remained trapped. Their kings paid tribute to the Viceroy of New Spain, but that's how far it went. Now, when New Spain separated from Spain and became the Empire of Mexico, and later the Republic of Mexico, this remained this way. The Mexicans who still had the Spanish structure that they worked with, even though they renamed the names of certain places. They may have departments instead of autonomous kingdoms. Now, they continued with the tradition of the Spaniards. It was only later on that some Mexicans migrated towards the north and began to construct towns. And when this happened, the United States came and they took half of Mexico's territory. And when this happened, it's only later in the 19th century that when many migrants from Europe poured in, that infrastructure, let me say modern infrastructure, became a reality in that part of North America. Now, if those natives over there would have collided with the Spaniards, and they would have taken they would have received an active role in the Spanish Empire, they would have gotten better administration back then, before the Mexicans separated from Spain, and that would have given them a better economic position. But what happened now was that they remained in stagnation. So when the United States took over, and shortly after that many European migrants poured in, they were in a disadvantage. If they had been active stakeholders in the Spanish Empire, they would have shared in the wealth of the Spanish Empire, and they would have better infrastructure, so they would have been in a far better state to regulate the new influence from the United States. They would have been more able to handle the influx of European migrants. It would have worked out far better for them, because many of those native ethnicities lost most of their land, and their descendants now are living in those special reservations, those reservation camps. Now, their wall projects, as I call it, backfired for generations long. Now, they don't possess most of the land their ancestors used to have. So, that's why I'm telling you in this video, beware with building walls. It's better to look at the bigger picture and examine what would be the best way with the most long-term advantage. Because I'm to repeat it, if those native tribes would have had better infrastructure during the Spanish Empire, they would have been able to trade more, they would have had more abundance, they would have had more say in New Spain. So when Mexico would have become independent, it would been a big stakeholder of the Mexican economy. So if the Americans would come and took over, the Americans would have to deal with them before they could go to the Pacific. But now the Americans could easily pass by them towards the Pacific, and they lost generation after generation. Now, about the wall project in the United States, I don't even know if that wall will really come. But if that wall will come, I'm telling you straight up, the American people will lose, just like the native tribes between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific lost during Spanish occupation. That's why I'm telling you, always look at the bigger picture. Be at peace.